Welcome back, everyone. Today, we've got a truly fascinating explainer lined up for you. We're going to unpack a really compelling piece of source material that explores the whole concept of actively constructing the course of our lives. It proposes that we aren't just passive passengers on the journey of life, but rather we can actually be the architects of our own destiny. And the tool it focuses on for this construction? A practice referred to as midnight warfare. It's this incredibly structured, strategic approach to spiritual defense and intervention. So, let's get right into it. Right off the bat, the source text hits us with a pretty striking question. When things are heading in a bad direction, do we just fold our arms and watch helplessly? The author describes those moments when you start seeing negative patterns forming, or maybe you feel a targeted attack heading your way. Now, human instinct usually leans towards panic or just giving up. But the text we're analyzing today argues for a completely different response, a strategic, deliberate counterattack. So here is our architectural blueprint for today's explainer. 1. The midnight battlefield. 2. Alert and meaningful prayer. 3. Pulling down strongholds. 4. And this is a big one. Everything the Lord said. And finally, number 5, spiritual controls physical. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the midnight battlefield. We need to clearly define what midnight warfare actually is according to the text. Notice the words being used here, active and deliberate intervention. This absolutely is not your standard passive bedtime routine where you casually run through a list of thoughts before drifting off. The author asserts that consistent, meaningful midnight prayer is a specialized tool used to directly dictate which direction your life should go. It's framed as an active intervention to steer your destiny away from harm and toward a designated path. But how do you actually know when it's time to intervene? Well, the text provides some very specific triggers. The author points out that recognizing the threat is step 1. This could be noticing a negative, recurring pattern in your family history. It could be a specific warning. The author explicitly mentions God showing you or someone else an attack in a dream. Or it could simply be the unmistakable reality that things in your life are already visibly heading in a bad direction. These are your clear indicators that a spiritual counterattack is required. Which brings us to Section 2, alert and meaningful prayer. The author draws a really stark contrast here. We typically imagine waking up in the middle of the night as a totally drowsy, yawning kind of affair, maybe quickly summarizing a prayer just to get back to bed. But the text explicitly warns against doing that. You can't fight a war if your main goal is just hitting the pillow again. Instead, meaningful prayer demands that your brain is wide awake. The source insists that this physical state of total alertness is non-negotiable for this type of spiritual intervention. So the crucial point is how we actually put this into practice. The author outlines a very literal 4-step action plan, which they claim to have personally tried and proven. Step 1, actually wake up at midnight. Step 2, shake off the sleep and achieve a clear, alert mind. Step 3, pray meaningfully, no cutting corners here. And step 4, which is absolutely vital, speak scriptures directly to your situation. The text even suggests you can literally just Google specific verses to read out loud. It's a highly structured, systematic approach for the believer to take immediate action. Moving on to Section 3, pulling down strongholds. The source material uses a very famous piece of scripture to illustrate this massive transition from victim to warrior. We take up the weapons of our warfare, for they are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds. The emphasis here in the text is all about taking ownership of the situation. You aren't fighting with physical or carnal weapons. The author states that through this vehement midnight prayer, you are deploying spiritual weapons that have the literal power to dismantle negative situations and strongholds that are threatening your destiny. And that leads us perfectly into Section 4, everything the Lord said. This is really the ultimate anchor of the entire practice. Because according to the text, you don't just fight with your own words, you weaponize everything the Lord said. The author's strategy relies entirely on taking the exact words God has spoken, whether that's through revealed warnings in dreams or specific Bible verses, and throwing them directly at the negative situation. You read them aloud. You make vehement decrees based entirely on your designated status as his child. This is your ammunition for the midnight battlefield. You see, earthly circumstances might be screaming at you that things are heading in a bad direction, that you're the tail, you're beneath, or that you are experiencing plans for evil. But what does the author do at midnight? They wake up and violently contrast that physical reality by decreeing everything the Lord said. They declare God's promises, that they are the head and not the tail, above and not beneath, and that God has plans for good and not evil. It's all about using the specific words God has spoken as a direct, targeted counterattack. Finally, Section 5. Spiritual controls physical. Now, despite all this talk of waking up in anger and engaging in serious, vehement warfare, the text explicitly quotes Psalm 51:17. It heavily emphasizes a broken spirit and a broken and a contrite heart. The author is pointing out a really fascinating paradox here. The outward spiritual warfare has to be fierce and vehement, built entirely on everything the Lord said, but your internal posture before God must remain totally humble, broken, and completely reliant on Him. And if that structure is followed, the alert mind, the specific use of Scripture, the vehement decrees, and the contrite heart, the author promises a specific outcome. As this heavy-hitting quote from the source cements, you will see that indeed the spiritual controls the physical. This is the core thesis of the entire text. By doing the intense work in the unseen spiritual realm at midnight, the author claims you can literally dictate and redirect the physical circumstances of your life during the day. We've really unpacked the blueprint today, recognizing the threat, achieving an alert mind, weaponizing everything the Lord said, and maintaining a contrite heart to govern the physical world. It's a highly structured, bold approach to facing adversity. So, based on the framework we've explored from our source material today, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. When the negative patterns emerge and the warnings come, will you rise up tonight to direct the course of your destiny? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.